Hello and welcome to today's video, and this is a continuation of a video I made and obviously debuted last week, where I was discussing the pros and cons of rejuvenating an old machine like this one. As you may remember, this is the Ferguson 3V29, which is equivalent to a JVC 7300. So JVC HR 7300, if I recall correctly. Now, this machine has a degree of sentimental value because it was purchased for me by my stepdad, and unfortunately my stepdad died a number of years ago, and this is just sort of like one of the machines that I have that has a degree of sentimental value. So it's sort of in my interest really to sort of keep it going. Now, what you may actually sort of discover instantly when looking at it is inside it is very similar to the Baird 8940 or the Form 8940, JVC equivalent being the HR 7350, which is a top-loading linear stereo machine. This is the absolute bottom of the pile. This is a standard play, mono, single event timer machine with no Dolby noise reduction. The 3V30, which is the next model up from this, which I think is either the Thorn 8930 or the JVC HR 73, I want to say 7330, but I may be wrong on that. There is a JVC version as well that has mono audio but with the Dolby noise reduction circuitry. I think it also has a slightly better display on the front, so it doesn't just have the clock, it also has the clock with the actual day and the number of seconds, whereas this one just has a clock with a nice little snowflake that flashes to let you know that the seconds are passing. So it is a base level machine. It is a nice sort of entry level setup, and as I was saying earlier, the simplicity is one of the reasons why it's quite a nice machine to sort of get your teeth stuck into if you've never dealt with VCRs before. There is plenty of documentation actually surrounding these machines, so there is really sort of a lot of information you can get for when you come to want to repair one of these. Now, this one has the problem that they all sort of tend to suffer from. Every deck of this era has this particular problem, and when I say every deck, I mean every JVC and Thorn deck. They all have this problem at least once in their life, and it's to do with the motor which loads the cassette around the video heads or the head drum. And it's because there needs to be a certain amount of torque to get it to that very last point where it's fully around the video heads, or head drum rather. And sometimes they just don't have enough torque to be able to do that. So you get a situation where the motor will slip and it just can't pull the loading posts any further around the head drum. So you're left with a situation where the machine isn't really actually doing anything. However, that's not the end of the world, because it's one of those faults that can be fixed fairly easily, albeit it is a bit fiddly, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. First thing you want to do after taking the top cover off, because you'll need to get into the top end, is you want to remove this bottom cover. And in a moment we're going to be flipping this board upwards to gain access to the underside of the deck. Now, you'll probably want to do this before you flip the bottom board, but something that I like to do is these two posts. I like to grab a elastic band or a loading belt that I'm not really going to need anymore, and loop it around here and one of these spools. Usually the supply spool is a good one to use. So if you bear with me, there's one. There we go. So that can go around here, here, and there. There we go. Now that's those locked into position. The reason why you want to do that is when you are changing the belt, when you take the motor out, one of these is sort of quite liable to actually ping forward. Something else that I like to do as well, I'll just grab out my toolbox and see if it is easily accessible, is I like to put a bit of silicone grease at the base of those loading posts. Excuse the noise in the background. I'm just trying to grab this out. There we are, the silicone grease. And I just like to blob a bit of this onto the loading post tracks, really because I want to give this as much assistance as I can in order to ensure that it is as free moving as possible. So I blob a bit onto there. And blob a bit onto the other one. There we go. There we are. That'll keep things moving nicely. Now this is the stuff that I'm using. This is Ferguson silicone grease. I think this one's actually quite an old one because, well, actually not that old. It's still got a website on here, www.ambersil.com. But it's made by CPC Industries, Bridgewater, Somerset, England, which is, well, Bridgewater is 20 miles down the road for me. So it's a local it's a local industry, it would seem. I don't know if that factory still exists. There has been a lot of development in Bridgewater over the years. The traditional cellophane factory is long gone. That's now a commercial estate, and there are some houses there as well. But certainly on the edge of the town there is still some sort of industry. Not sure if you would sort of class it as heavy industry, but I think there's a Morrison's distribution centre. I think Muller are based there as well, amongst other sort of various companies. But yeah, the big one, which was on the outskirts of Sydenham, which was the cellophane factory, I think they packed up shop in the early 2000s, and it did take a number of years for the land to be decontaminated. It's a bit like Glastonbury. So Glastonbury for years had Morelands, which was a leather and tannery factory. There was also branches of Morelands in Highbridge as well. But the one in Glastonbury was a huge factory. And I remember when I moved to Glastonbury with my parents back in 1987, it was derelict. And it remained in that state all the way through the 90s. And things only really started to happen in the early 2000s. But now it's, I think they've got Premier Inn and other various developments around there where, again, Glastonbury used to have such small little industries. There was a company called Imco, which made plastic products, and there was, many years ago, ITV used to do a telethon, and It was sort of it was competition almost for comic relief, which was a BBC thing. So obviously ITV wanted a slice of that action, so to speak. So Telethon was dreamed up, and you could at one point actually for the Telethon buy these sort of stupid looking Telethon plastic ear things. There was sort of like these blue ear things that you put over your head. So Comic Relief had the red nose, ITV Telethon had the ears. And the ears were manufactured at IMCO in Glastonbury. Yeah, a little bit of local knowledge. Anyway, back to this. The belts need replacing desperately, as you can see, especially this one around the capstan. That is very dry, very in need of replacement. This one is also a bit slack as well, and that's the one that we sort of do tend to want to focus on. So I'm going to shift this over a little bit. I'm going to bring the camera into here and angle it down so we can get a look at what we're doing. So it's quite possible I may need to order myself a service kit for this, but let's have a look and see what we've got in my belt box. Where it is possible I do have suitable beltage. It's also possible that I don't have suitable beltage and I'll need to purchase some. So we need a flat drive belt. I've got one here, but I think it might be... Yeah, this one's actually worn, so that one's been used before, so I'll keep that to one side and I'll see if I have any new drive belts. I've got a pack here of drive belts, but they're audio. 81, yeah, that's going to be too big. 81mm, I think that might be too big. I'm probably going to be okay with the loading belt. It's that flat belt that's going to cause me problems. Now, even if companies will no longer supply service kits for these, there's actually no need to panic, because these are just standard drive belts. Now, as long as you measure the drive belt and measure the thickness, or to a certain degree, and also the width and length, so you sort of stretch them out and then you measure from sort of one point to the other point, then a number of companies should be able to provide you with an equivalent. So these are known as flat belts, these ones are known as square belts. I've gone through this before, and I think there's also a video that I've done previously where I've talked about how to measure these various belts. It's worth a look because it's got me out of trouble myself before when I've been trying to source belts for these things. So this one, I can't remember what this one does. I thought it drove the counter, but no. That one is required though, it won't work without it. I can't for the life of me remember what it's for. Anyway, let's get that there, and then that will come up and we can get to these belts. So I'll get rid of that one first because that's the easiest. Then we can get rid of this flat belt like so. Yeah, that is very, very dry. There we go. So I tend to measure them like this, from point A here to point B here. Measure the width, and sometimes you can measure the thickness as well. Thickness is fairly important because you want something that's going to be thick enough to stretch without snapping. You can see with this one that it is really brittle. And that's something I was saying last time about the belts that JVC and Ferguson tended to use. They didn't so much go to the point where they would turn into gunge. They would just go brittle. Manufacturers like Hitachi, and I think Sony as well, had belts that would sort of turn into a sort of a disgusting, goopy, sludgy goo, which is a nightmare to clean out. Well, not really a nightmare, it's more of a faff than a nightmare. I just realised I was covering up the camera there, but you can sort of see what I've tried to achieve by putting this on. Now we need a belt to go onto there, and I think I've got something suitable. Here we go, this little one here should do the job. Now with this you just need to make sure that it actually goes into the pulley. It's quite possible for it to get caught up slightly wrong. Oops. Make sure it stays up. Right, now let's lift that up, put that over, and back into position, like so. Voila! Now I just need to screw it down. This is where my life gets complicated, because I invariably lose the screws that I'm using. So what I like to do is lift this up slightly, pop the screw into there, and then get it to catch, and then repeat on the other side, so that you don't lose the screw, but you are still screwing it back into place. This one, I've got to go, I'll try and do this left-handed so that you can see what I'm doing. So, lift up, drop in, and away you go. That's not going to work because I need to do it with my hand that I normally use. So, in, and down, and in, and turn until we get to a point where it finds where it wants to go. Whoopsie, it wants to go there. Oh, botheration. Yeah, as I say, there's a knack to it, and I sometimes have that knack and I sometimes don't have that knack. And I think if I'm careful, I don't have that knack because it's quite fiddly. That's the thing with these decks. They are very easy to service, but putting the screws back in is fiddly. There's no escaping that. That's just something you're going to have to live with. And there. Let's back that off, get in a better position, and down we go. So there is that one, and there is this one. In. Make sure it still rotates, which it does. Move on to this one. So if you remember from other videos that I've done with this type of thing, one up here, so one here, and one right about here. There we are. Now with this one I'm going to be a little bit careful because I don't want to lose these screws inside the machine itself. So there's one. I'll have to find that in a minute. And here's the other. What I'll try to do is actually lift this out. Oh, I found the other one, it's there next to the head. I'll get that out in a moment with a smaller screwdriver. In fact, here's one. There we go. There we go, there's one. That's lucky. Here's this one. There we go. And then let me just grab that out of there. Done. So you've probably seen me do this a number of times before, and unlike that multi-broadcast I was servicing the other week, this one uses the older design. I think this is the older design anyway. And it's slightly nicer because it's slightly easier to get these circlips off that I need to get off. See, that's the circlip off. And I'll recover the washer. There we go. There we are. Now just a simple case of remove that. So that's its spindle. Then off with this and the belt. And then hunt out for a new belt. So I'm probably going to do my double up on belts again because I don't have a suitably sized belt to hand, and as soon as I get a suitably sized belt I will replace it with the correct one. But just so we've got something that works, I'm going to replace it with a pair of belts which are the correct size. And I'll be honest, that has worked absolutely perfectly for me in the past. but I've got an order to put in for a set of correctly sized belts. Now what you want to do when you refit this is you fit it around here, but you keep these belts, or the belt, taut in your hand, so that when you put it back into here, you can go straight over the motor pulley, like so. And then you want to go straight in with the axle shaft, so into the bottom here. As I say, it's going to be a bit fiddly, but and don't forget the washer there. So you've got a washer here, and you've got a circlip at the end. You only need to disturb the circlip at one end, which is useful. And then you just put that like so, and there you go, you're through. And then just rotate to make sure that the belt is on. Then we can grab our little washer, put that back on, like so, and then we can grab our circlip. Now with the circlip, you want to get the washer so that it's flat, and get the circlip so that it starts to engage with the little indentation on the shaft itself. And this is very fiddly to do, so bear with me whilst I get this sorted. So I'm going to pop that there. And we are, I think, at a point where it should hopefully be almost locked in place. I'll just put that down a bit. Whoopsie. Pop that down there. Pop that onto there. Whoops. Pop that onto there. Come up a little bit. Right, so let's get that there, and you've got to do this in such a way that you don't ping it into orbit. And there, and it's in. As I say, that is really fiddly. So the next thing is we're going to grab some of the grease that we were using, and there's a couple of points that we are going to grease up. So we're going to put some of the grease into here. So when the motor actually starts to run, this will lubricate this rather nicely. And we're going to put the grease onto here as well. Now, I have seen in the past these cogs break, but to give you an idea of how often I've seen that happen, I have seen that happen once, and that was on quite a well-used machine. So don't be alarmed, it's not something that seems to happen on a regular basis. So just put the grease around here. Now I can flip this back and try and fiddle it back into place. So I'll do that like so. remembering how it goes in. Also remembering the fact this wiring loom, like on all of these decks, gets in the way. There we go. And whether or not this will work, I don't know, but what you can try to get the screws in is grease. I've said this before, but greasing up the tip of your screwdriver, pop in the screw onto the end so that it doesn't fall off. Hit and miss, to be honest with you, very hit and miss. And make sure that you keep the screw away from any belts or anything like that, because last thing you want is grease on the belts. It is cleanable, so you can clean it off, but it's just one of those extra hassles that you can avoid by just being a bit careful. Now, the one that always gets me badly is this one right at the back here. So this one there, that's the one that is the proper pain. And what I'm going to do is get it to the hole, move the assembly, just start turning, and hope that I get it in. That's the quickest I've ever got it in. Yeah, that's unbelievable. That's the quickest I've ever got that in. So that means now I can just put the base cap down, or the baseboard. The board itself didn't show. I don't know if I showed you this or not, but little blue screws. So you know that the little blue screws are for this bottom board, and it's held in at certain points along the way. So there's one here. I think there is one here. Yep, there is. As you can sort of tell, there is screw marks around, and then there's one over here. This bottom board is very similar to the one, it's probably the, I'm not actually, no, it's going to be different, I think. So this is the audio section, so this is mono. So I don't think this is the same as the board in the 8940/7350. So that's just something to bear in mind if you are raiding one of these for spares to repair a more upmarket deck. Bear in mind that some of the boards may not be compatible. At the very best, they'll be missing components which you can just solder in. But I'll be honest, it's not something I've checked in any sort of great detail. Right, so let's pop this over and switch it on. Ow. That wasn't an electric shock, that was just points on the board. Now we can release our little thing there. We can plug it back in. There we go. There we go, that's ready. Video lamp is also working on this one as well. Now that does just do that. There is, I think I may have shown you this before, but there is like a little fan mechanism, which is like a dampener, and there is a an idler with a little rubber idler on it, which is supposed to go onto the teeth on this and dampen it so it comes up like that, and the little fan generates air resistance. But after after a number of years, they just don't really work anymore. Right, so let's hit play. There we go. So, new capstan belt, new loading belt, and a bit of greasing up of the relevant points, and we have something that's working. That's pretty good, actually. Let's see if fast forward search is okay. Yep, that's fine. Rewind search. A little sluggish, but working otherwise. Pause. Play. Perfect. Doing exactly what it should. Plus, I think is the counter working? It's stopped working. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, no. Yes, that's what it is. So there was belt on the capstan, and I said, oh, I don't know what that does. I think it drives this little pulley down here. Although, to be honest, that's actually driven by the take-up spool. So, no, I don't think that is the same belt. But that should drive the counter, which doesn't seem to be working at the moment, but that's because there's a little belt in here that is a little bit past its best. It's easy enough to replace, but you need to unscrew a little screw at the front of the counter here. So there's a little screw about here, just above the clock, which will then allow you to remove the counter assembly and replace the belt. But to be honest, I'm not too fussed about replacing the belt for a counter. It's not something I've really ever used on older VCRs like this because they are a little bit inaccurate. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is just pop the cover back on, and then next time we'll just hook it up to a TV set and just check everything's okay. But for the moment, that concludes this video. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Hope you have found this useful. Take care. See you again very soon. Thanks for watching.